Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. This is episode number 20. We started doing this podcast at the beginning of 2021 to virtually travel around the UK, around the United Kingdom, to chat to devotees, meet devotees, and find out what's happening, I guess, out in the real world, find out what people are up to. And I'm really pleased to say that our guest this week is Felix from Old Trafford. Great to see you, Felix.
Thank you.
And
good to see you as well, of course.
Thank you. We had a chat. We were chatting about something else on Zoom the other day. And of course, most people, including myself, and I'm not a football fan at all, most people, when they think of Old Trafford, might think of Manchester United, the football club. So that's where Felix is based, where Felix is living now. So this podcast, the Hare Krishnas in Britain, is being broadcast on Facebook and on YouTube. And it's part of a new project that will be officially launched in September called the Hare Krishna Project, which is a new national initiative to share Krishna consciousness with people around Britain in a presentable and understandable way that they may understand. Okay, so Felix, let's start just by finding out more about you and where you're from.
Right, I was born in Blackpool, which is a northwest English seaside town. I think most people here will have heard of it. It's famous for its illuminations, 7 miles of wonderful coloured lights and tableaus and lasers all along the promenade. Quite a magical place in its own right. And I've lived in Manchester for the past nearly 40 years now, since I came over here to study at Manchester University. So I've actually lived in Manchester longer than I've lived in Blackpool, so I'm a Mancunian kind of. But I'll always be a sand grown, and that's what they call you if you're from Blackpool. You've grown in the sand, you see.
Wow. Well, Manchester's a wonderful city. I have to admit, I haven't been to Manchester as many times as I could have. But whenever I visit Manchester, I'm quite overwhelmed by the diversity and the kind of, the kind of colours and the array of people that are there. So we kind of made contact, must have been a few months ago on social media, when I started to kind of promote, I think my book, started to promote the Hare Krishna project. And even though you have been around kind of spiritual circles for a very long time, you're quite new to the Hare Krishna movement. Tell us a bit about some of your kind of recent encounters with the Hare Krishnas.
Well, recent encounters with the Hare Krishnas, I used to see them hanging around, selling books or sometimes dancing around at the railway station in Manchester, which doesn't seem to happen now. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think the main contact was made initially, which drew me into getting in touch with you and other devotees. And there was a Rathayatra in Manchester on the green near the cathedral, which will be 2019 now in May.
Okay.
Jagannath, would that be right?
Yeah, Lord Jagannath Rathayatra.
Yeah. I saw it advertised on Facebook, and I wasn't particularly involved with any Hare Krishna things then, and I thought that looks really good. I'd like to go and see that, and the food's really good too. So I went along, took my partner with me, and we were quite late in the day going there because we had other things to do, but there was still some performances going on and food coming out. And my partner actually had a head shave that day, and you could see people thinking, who's that lazy devil hanging around with his mum? Why isn't he helping? So she looked a bit like a Hare Krishna man. And I wasn't really sure what to do because I hadn't bought any flowers or fruit or anything like that. And I picked a flower that had fallen up from the floor, and there was a little image of Krishna. And I said, I'm sorry, I haven't really brought anything and I don't know what I'm doing here, but I've just picked this up for you and put it back on the podium. And as I said it, a group of people came dancing past, and I just felt that I ought to dance with them. And I have very, very weak muscles. I have ME and fibromyalgia, terrible mobility issues. And I just did a little dance, and Christy said, "Oh, you're really enjoying that, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I think I am." And as I agreed with her, I suppose you studied chakras, the chakras of the body. I felt this little sort of ping in the heart area and felt this little blue flower there. And I
Wow.
thought, oh, the little blue flower, interesting. I've done Reiki 1. I do some Reiki just for friends and family. And when I got home, I thought, right, I'm going to look this up. So I put in Krishna, blue flower. And there actually is a specific blue flower called the Krishna flower, which I've never heard of.
I didn't know that either.
No, it's a sort of
Wow.
almost luminous blue little lotus, very, very intense blue. And it's supposed to be like Krishna's skin or eyes, or however you make the connection. And I had absolutely no idea about that. None. And when I was very, very ill with COVID, the whole of February, there was a contact there, which I can tell you about a little later on if you like. It's quite personal. And I just started looking more into Hare Krishna, listening to lectures, reading the books, rereading the Bhagavad Gita, because we had studied parts of it at university. You have to rush through, unfortunately, with the 10-week semesters that you have. You can't really do anything justice. But yeah, so here I am.
What did you study at university?
I studied what was then called theology. It was either theology and religious studies or theology and comparative religion, and you had a massive choice of what to take. I studied very few Christian topics. You had to do at least one, and I did Christian ethics. And what did I do? Mainly Buddhism. I particularly wanted to study Buddhism because I was very interested in Eastern religions. And the professor there, Lance Cousins, who's passed on now, was a true pundit. I mean, he was a practitioner. He wasn't just a lecturer. He was very highly regarded in Buddhist circles, and he taught me. It was a small group of us. And he also taught Judaic mysticism, Kabbalah, which has always been something that I've studied on and off since I was a child, really. And I see parallels there with the ideal of Krishna and the idea of the deity residing within each person, waiting to be expressed and go home, as it were.
You know, whenever anyone mentions Kabbalah, I always think of Madonna. I don't know if she's still practicing Jewish mysticism, but she was for a period of time about.
She may have been, yes.
But
yeah.
You know how sometimes your mind triggers things. So that's, I mean, fascinating. I mean, to be studying, I mean, theology and comparative religion at university. My degree was probably almost similar. I did a degree in the study of religion, which was comparative religion. We didn't do theology. I actually didn't want to do theology because I made the assumption that there might be a bias or a weight towards Christian theology,
right?
Which I'm not against. I just didn't want to do a whole degree in it.
No.
You know, and I wanted to have a more comparative look at religions in general.
Oh, sure. Yeah. My second year was when I was saying to you the other day, it was a broad look at Indian religions, Hinduism, if you like. And again, you know, you can only cover so much. And the professor there, he's also left us now, Professor John Hinnells, is a white man who is an international expert on Indian religion and culture, and also Zoroastrianism, which was fascinating. And he did a minor in Egyptology.
Amazing.
Oh, yeah, I could do it all again if I got the grant for it. You know, we got grants then.
Back in the day.
Back in the day, yes. I got a full grant, a mature student's grant, a book grant, and all my tax back for that year. So I was loaded when I rolled up.
So you've always had an interest in religion, and so even though you're a kind of relative new member of the Hare Krishna family, you've had a long interest in religion and spirituality. And I was very intrigued. We shared some emails before this podcast, and I was very intrigued by some of the things that you shared with me about your childhood in terms of your parents and their interests. So tell some of the viewers, some of the listeners about your upbringing and some of the kind of religious influences and things.
Well, my father was a printer. He fought in the RAF during the Second World War, and my mum was a seamstress. She'd worked making aeroplanes, believe it or not, in the Second World War. And he moved from London to Blackpool to be with her when they were engaged. They got married. I was their first child. And it was always books were the thing in my family. I was very, very fortunate because they had very little money, but they made sure I joined the library as soon as I could. At the age of 5, I could read and write before I went to school. And it's quite nerve-wracking now to think those books, some of them now, they're worth hundreds, even thousands of pounds a copy, and some of them have been sold or passed on. And some of them I used to put on the floor and make into little stepping stones and walk up and down on them when I was a child. And of course, these books were largely books on esoteric matters. There were theosophical books, Rosicrucian almanacs, books about spiritualism and the afterlife. I think I mentioned last time that my mum particularly was very friendly with the people at the World Healing Centre just up the road from our house. And you can see it. I can give links to anybody who's interested for all these matters. It was a huge Victorian Gothic type house with a turret at the round top. And I used to think that all this healing would shoot out all across the world from this tower, you see. My mum was very into that. There were 2 gentlemen who lived there who were sort of little monastic order in their own right, Brother Carl and Brother Mandus. You can still get Brother Mandus's books. And my mum found herself to be a natural healer, and she had the gift of second sight as well, which I have also. She would always know if somebody was pregnant or what they were going to have, or, you know, I don't mean she was nosy, I mean she just knew these things.
So second sight is maybe some kind of psychic ability, is it?
Yes, yeah. It can be a nuisance actually at times, but you know, my dad always said that I'd had lots and lots of lifetimes, and I'm pretty sure he's right. But my dad, of course, he shared a lot of interest with my mum. They were quite unusual people, so it's great that they got together. They found each other, you know, with all these bombs going off and whatever. He had been brought up as a very strict Roman Catholic with some Irish in his background in London, and he absolutely detested the Catholic Church. I know he went to what do they call the Holy Brothers of the Holy Cross, or anyway, it's one of these schools where they beat little boys quite vigorously and tell them that they're going to go to hell and all this sort of thing. And he completely turned his back on Catholicism, and he wanted answers. He was very, very widely read for somebody from a very poor background, and he studied all these mystical tomes, if you like, and different philosophies that would go some way to explaining why he was here and where he was going. And he joined various societies when he was young, such as the Rosicrucians and the Golden Dawn and the Theosophical movement. He used to write to an Indian man, and the letters used to go by donkey, apparently. So he used to get a response about every 3 weeks from this Indian monk with his questions. That's the 50s, 40s and 50s, that would have been. And he did an incredible amount of work. I treasure all his notes. I have them here. But he managed to fit that in between working full time, very hard, and looking after a daughter and wife. I'm rambling on a bit, so I don't know what else you want to know.
I mean, I generally find kind of new religious movements, some people would call them cults. I don't like that word particularly. Alternative groups. I find it fascinating. I mean, I did a few electives in new religious movements at university.
Oh, right.
So I studied the Theosophical Society. I have to admit, I don't remember much about it. The other organization you mentioned, the Rosicrucians, I'm not aware of. But the Theosophical Society, I remember, it was quite funny actually. This gentleman came to give a talk from the Theosophical Society, and he was also an ordained Church of England vicar.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating. And obviously, if you go back in history, I think particularly to the 1890s, you've got Madame Blavatsky, and I think it was Henry Oswald. Was that his name?
Olcott.
Olcott, and they were kind of I think there was another person involved, maybe.
There is, and I should have my notes in, because unfortunately my conditions affected my short-term memory very badly.
I've got a book here somewhere, but
there's Arthur Conan Doyle for one.
Yeah, yeah, and it was very popular in the late 1800s. The Theosophical Society, and there's philosophical branches were being set up all over the world. And it was certainly a mix of maybe some Christian theology with Hindu theology and kind of mysticism. And I was just always fascinated with studying different belief systems, because some of them are they could be perceived as so far out from whatever the mainstream is. I mean, the concept of mainstream is also quite difficult, because the mainstream means that everyone accepts that some things are acceptable and some things are not. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody recently about mainstream religious beliefs. I can't remember who it was now, but it was so in mainstream Christianity, there's this idea that 2,000 years ago, a 14-year-old girl didn't have sex but had a baby. So she was a virgin. Now, that's quite an outlandish idea to some extent. Whereas in the Hare Krishna tradition and wider Vaishnavism, there's a view that Krishna or Vishnu appeared as a half man and half lion. So in one sense, there's ideas in every religious tradition that might sound or seem a bit difficult to accept. And yeah, I mean, the Golden Dawn, I remember hearing, I remember a lot of these things. There was also the kind of the UFO groups, the Raelian movement, ufology. I can't remember all of them now, but just fascinating. And it's also, and also along with it, you get lots of people like you and I that are searching. And a lot of these groups provide answers. Which is how they've been successful, so to speak.
Yes, of course, there's always the argument that if they all provide answers, they can't all be right. But I think they actually can, because I think spirituality is as subjective as the person, and some people's right path is the Roman Catholic path, others is quite a laid-back cultural Jewish path where you have a Seder meal once a week, and your kids might have a bar or bat mitzvah. Other people may prefer to be very strictly Muslim, and I think depending on how a person is growing, and I don't mean that we grow in a linear way from religion to another. I mean, I think the path that people are on is the right one for them at particular times in life. I don't think it's a case of just going out and say, oh, that's the right answer there, because we don't know. We do live in ignorance. It's true.
Yeah. I mean,
it's that glorious ignorance that keeps us seeking. You're pixelating a little bit. I don't know if you can see it.
You're pixelating a bit as well. But I think it's just returned to normal as we said that. It's the weather. I only found out recently that actually the weather can affect Wi-Fi. I never knew that in my ignorance.
I've said it for years, and people have said, oh, it does.
It does.
It's not Madame Blavatsky's masters listening in, is it?
Yeah, some psychic healers from somewhere in the world are listening in, or
oh, good, they can come and fix the Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Oh, so in terms of your own spiritual journey, so you did a degree back in the 1980s in comparative religion. You were raised around a number of religious or spiritual ideas in terms of healing, maybe some mediumship. Your mother was a medium?
She was a natural medium. She used to pick up on things when people had passed on, and she had a spiritualist friend she used to go and see. But I don't know. I mean, I'd like to state here, I believe it's a fact that I have spoken with people after they've died. I know that I have. I definitely have. But how much of that is an externalized grief or memory, we can't say, but it satisfies me enough to make me think, yes, there is something that carries on. And it's not just some sort of electrical trace that people have left by passing through the world, that there is actually an identity, a soul, if you will, that goes to somewhere else and then possibly reincarnates in some way.
So in terms of your own experiences as a child with your parents, and then just over the last few years, kind of discovering Krishna consciousness and reading and exploring, what was going on spiritually between those 2 points, childhood and 2 years ago? Did you, over the years, have you also got involved with different religious groups?
Yeah, I worked for about 3 years with a very modern Anglican church, mainly voluntary, a little bit of paid work too, which was good fun. I made a number of friends there. You know, I could never wholeheartedly put my hand on my heart and say I believe what these people are believing. It was a high Anglican church. We all enjoy a bit of pageantry, don't we? Particularly also when you're working towards social justice and you know, helping those less fortunate. But I realized that so many people understood a lot of the Bible, particularly the New Testament, literally. And because of what I read and what I knew, I was thinking, it's the Mithras story again. It's the same old story through thousands and thousands of years about the wise person, usually a man, who dies but doesn't die and comes back, and you can enjoy a life with him if you are of that mind, if you like. The fact that Jesus is supposed to have said that there are some people he tells stories to in a particular way because they'll understand the parables, and then there are others that won't understand. I mean, the stories are clearly, the biblical stories are clearly stories about a master, an avatar, if you like. And of course I have all this, and a lot of regular Christian folk don't. And so I left the church, went back to my old pagan roots and just did my own thing. And I have friends from all sorts of pagan organizations, from pagan Northwest to American members of the Church of Satan, would you believe, although it isn't what a lot of people would think it is. I just sort of did my own thing. I think it's very healthy to do one's own thing.
And be independent minded and try as much as possible to think for yourself.
Yes. I've never actually nailed my colours to a mast 100%. I don't know if I ever would, but every so often I get a nudge from something out there, from deity, if you like. I forgot to mention this, that for quite a few years I had a lot of very strange coincidences and spiritual nudges, if you like, from the old Haitian voodoo gods, the lower. And I ended up meeting a friend of a friend who is actually a voodoo high priest. You couldn't make this stuff up. And he turned out to live like a quarter of a mile up the road in Manchester. And I studied that. And this was at the same time as I was doing my adult teaching postgrad certificate. And I was asked to do a course similar for Open University students studying world religions. And I thought, I'll do one on Haitian voodoo. I don't think it's been done before. I still have the book if anybody's interested.
Wow.
And that was really good fun. It was very, very interesting to do. And I know that those gods have got me out of a mess once or twice. Absolutely. You know, there's this sort of reality. I don't know how you feel about Krishna and the Indian gods, but there's a reality that you can't really explain to people about them. It's not just a case of belief. Like, if I believe I'm going to switch that light on, I hope I will get a light on the ceiling. It's and it's not faith, where you're told you must have faith in something in order to make it work and to show your devotion. I think deities are actually real. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna kind of, certainly in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, or the Hare Krishna tradition, the Vaishnava tradition, we recognize that Krishna is the supreme Lord. Krishna is the supreme deity, if you like. And there are many demigods. So I guess it's the use of semantics, but but we would use the term demigods to refer to
Yes.
other beings
Yes,
that are
sense.
working on behalf of Krishna, that are carrying out Krishna's requests or instructions. But certainly in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, which is the original name for the Hare Krishna movement, so to speak, that we're a kind of a monotheistic tradition. So we recognize Krishna as the Supreme Lord. And that's based on Sastra. Certainly in the Hare Krishna movement, we would struggle with the term Hindu or Hinduism.
Yes, of course. I was just using that in the broad sense, like
yeah.
do.
But it helps people to understand where we fit into the worldwide family. It's like you would put the Jehovah's Witnesses under the Christian umbrella broadly, and the Mormons, and maybe even the Moonies.
That's a very strange. I think that's a standalone, really, isn't it?
I mean,
the old moon is the.
I mean, some are quite independent in terms they have roots in nothing. I mean, if it's possible to have roots in nothing, such as, but certainly, yeah, I put the Unification Church, the Moonies, in broadly under the Christian umbrella. But in terms of Krishna consciousness, Hare Krishna, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, one devotee, I remember one Hare Krishna devotee in ISKCON, I remember was once talking to a TV journalist, and they said, well, this devotee said, well, if you have to call us Hindu, we're actually Orthodox Hindu, because everything we believe, and we don't use that word often in the Hare Krishna belief, but everything we believe is based on Sastra or scripture. So it says in the Brahma Samhita, the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is also known as the Bhagavat Purana, that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. So a lot of these ideas in general Hinduism, a lot of it's based, some of it is based on scripture, but a lot of it's based on hearsay and culture and traditions and family ways of doing things that have been passed down over thousands of years. But generally in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, things are usually based on scripture. That's kind of a bit of a long-winded answer to your question. So yes, we would definitely recognize demigods, different divine beings working on behalf of the supreme divine being. I mean, that's kind of a shortest answer. In terms of it's funny because you asked me that, and I was about to ask you what has interested you, what's caused you to be interested recently in Krishna consciousness?
I don't know. It's one of those taps on the shoulder that I get various deities, I think. Do you know, I honestly don't know. I've forgotten. Is that strange? I've forgotten.
Go on.
I remember doing some reading about Krishna, and I was also reading or revising, I should say, the Kabbalistic tree of life and its relationship to the chakras in the body and stages of enlightenment and whatever. And I thought, yeah, Krishna is at that point on the tree where the big God, the overarching God, if you like, pours into human form, and that macro person, the macrocosm, can enter the microcosm, the little people, and make their consciousness aware of him. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I thought that's interesting that there's that Jewish parallel. I mean, a lot of Kabbalah wasn't codified until the medieval times. You don't know how ancient parts of it are really. You know, I'm saying only 500 years ago, but I thought, yeah, that's really interesting. That works. And then I did some more reading, and then I went to the Rathayatra and then had the Blue Flower and did some more reading and chatted to people. Somehow ended up here. Oh, there's the Galva thing as well, that I was supporting the Galva group on Facebook. And that gave some directions to Krishna people and events as well.
So anyone who's a bit unsure that's listening or watching, Galva stands for the Gay and Lesbian Vaishnava Association. And you told me the other day, Felix, when we were chatting in another context, that you're a member of Galva.
Yes, I am. I was looking for a bit of voluntary work. I usually help out as an invigilator at the exams at MMU, that's Manchester Metropolitan Uni, in the summer, and of course everything's gone to pot with the virus and whatever. And I had an idea that there might be an organisation that helped the Hijra in India, because I've quite a modest qualification in teaching English as a second language. And I was reading about these Hijra schools. My partner's a transgender woman. I can go into that a little later. And I noticed that some of the trans people in the photographs were carrying images of Krishna or were dressed as him, or whatever. And I thought, oh, that's very interesting. So I joined Galva because obviously that, you know, we do have problems in this country, but in other countries it's a lot worse for LGBTQ plus people. And yes, I ended up going through more Hare Krishna stuff again via Galva. So I thought, I can't get away from it. I must be meant to be doing something.
Sometimes Krishna calls on us or sends these messages or keeps popping up. I mean, Krishna's everywhere. And Krishna keeps, you know, Galva, Rathayatra in Manchester, you know, Krishna's everywhere.
Yeah, my life has been filled with what Jung call synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, you know, where somebody might dismiss something as coincidence, but to you it has a very deep personal meaning. And it's happened to me so many times now. I just see synchronicities as quite a normal thing, but they will always point towards some aspect of spiritual development or enlightenment.
A Christian friend of mine says it's not a coincidence, it's a God incidence.
Yeah.
Which is quite a good one.
Yeah, it's a good one, yeah.
For anyone who's listening who's unsure about, Felix mentioned Hijra. So Hijra are a group of people in India that are legally recognized in law as the third gender or a third gender. So they're generally, I believe Felix might correct me, they're generally people that were born male, biologically male, and that have transitioned to female. And so legalistically, that's just the right expression, legalistically, India is quite liberal, legalistically.
Yes, legalistically.
But practically on the ground, socially, it's quite conservative. And unfortunately, LGBT people have been treated appallingly, actually, in India, which is surprising because if you look at Hindu theology, there's different stories about male gods or demigods transitioning to female gods or demigods. So actually, India should be quite liberal in many ways on these issues, gender identity, but it's not, unfortunately. So yeah, in case anyone was wondering about Hijra, and I think there's another term as well. I can't remember. I can't off the top of my head. I can't remember. You mentioned, because we're kind of going around and we're covering so many wonderful topics. You mentioned about this concept of deity or God existing in us, and in the Gaudiya Vaishnava or the Vaishnava or the Hare, it's got lots of names, the Hare Krishna tradition. It's called Paramatma. So Srila Prabhupada, the founder of Charya Viskon, said that there were kind of three aspects to Krishna or the divine being. So there's Bhagavan, which is the impersonal aspect of God. There's the Brahma, or Brahman, the impersonal aspect of God. Bhagavan, the supreme personality of Godhead, and Paramatma. So Brahman, Bhagavan, Paramatma. It's like a triangle. It's like a Hare Krishna trinity.
Triangle on the tree of life.
Yeah. And Paramatma is the form of Krishna, or the aspect of Krishna that exists in every single living entity. So I guess in Christianity, the closest thing would be Holy Spirit, maybe. I don't know. It's not a complete comparison, but there are differences theologically, but there are some similarities. I think in Christian theology, they'd say the Holy Spirit exists in, I've forgotten, but I don't.
They never seem quite sure, do they?
But in case any Hare
right.
Krishna theologians are listening, so it's and I made a slight error because it's been a long day. So Brahman, Bhagavan, Paramatma are kind of three aspects of the divine that Srila Prabhupada.
But that's an equilateral triangle, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
not going down
kind of so to speak. Yeah, so to speak. I mean, we generally in the Hare Krishna tradition don't generally recognize the Trimurti. It's not something that's really talked about in terms of Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma, because theologically we recognize Krishna as the most supreme. So we just go to the root cause, or we go to the top, the king, if you like, or the boss. So we don't necessarily focus on the Trimurti or the Hindu Trinity, as some would call it, like
the Satchitananda sort of.
Yeah.
Ah, that's interesting.
So I kind of,
hot.
It's very hot in Manchester. It's hot in Manchester.
It's hot in these buildings. It's like there's something going on with the cladding. We're getting safer cladding. And,
oh, well, that's good.
Well, it's good, yeah. It's been going on for 2 years and everybody's boiling.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. What was I saying? I don't look too shiny.
So it's fine. I kind of went back to that kind of Gaudiya Vaishnava theology point. Let's talk a bit more about you. So one of the reasons you got in touch with me a while ago is that I put out a podcast with Ranjiv, who was a campaigner in the Hare Krishna movement for LGBTQI equality, and it was a really fascinating podcast that needed to be done, because for the last decade, probably, I've traveled around the country organizing Hare Krishna events and festivals and things, and I've met a lot of devotees. But in terms of the number of devotees that I'm aware of that are out in terms of their sexual preference, that isn't heterosexuality, it's very few, because unfortunately, it's a personal view, unfortunately in the organizations like the Hare Krishna movement, issues around sexuality are not talked about enough. And organizations like ISKCON can be quite socially conservative. Mm-hmm. So we did this podcast, which was fascinating, and Ranjiv, who is a gay man, was happy to come on the show. And I think you and I might have made contact. Not sure. I can't remember if we were in contact before that, but
no, not long after that. Yeah.
And I really
was great, wasn't he? Yeah.
He was wonderful, and I think at least 12 people got in touch with him privately after to ask for his support. So he runs a support group for gay men in the Hare Krishna movement. I think initially that support group could be broadened or widened to others, but particularly it's gay men. At least 12 people got in touch to ask for his support, his advice.
That's interesting. So it's obviously needed.
Definitely. So you mentioned earlier, if you don't mind me saying, you mentioned earlier that your partner is a transgender woman.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So tell us a bit about your own identity. Is really difficult, but tell us a bit about your own identity and your background.
Oh gosh, I think I mentioned it, like a lot of born female people who have an intensely spiritual side. I never really felt female, like a woman or a girl. And there's some very interesting books you can read about this. I mean, one of the first Englishmen to be it's not consecrated, is it? Well, he was dedicated to become a Buddhist monk in Tibet, was Michael Dillon, who was actually technically female, but he was one of the first white British Tibetan monks who actually went and lived in Tibet. And he died quite young, about 40 something. And he was only exposed when a notice was put in the newspaper saying, do you want to claim your heritage, because he came from a wealthy family. And he said, well, no, because I live as a monastic and I'm not interested. Somebody chimed in and said, well, this is actually Laura Dillon. It's not, she wouldn't have got it anyway at the time, because females didn't inherit. Going back to like the 1920s, 30s. And there's another one by a woman whose name escapes me at the moment, called The Cave in the Snow, and that's very interesting. She lived as a sort of gendered person, as nominally as a Buddhist monk, again in Tibet. Sorry, I disappeared for a moment there.
It's okay. I can
Not
still,
literally.
I can still, yeah,
I wasn't
transcendental.
called into another dimension or anything. No, it's just a screen. Yeah, so I didn't really have any, I can't think of what the word is, any investment in particularly being a woman or a girl. And I was allowed to do what I liked as far as career and the way I dressed and everything went on. And I've had a number of relationships. As a woman, with men, I was that interested in other women. I've not been identified as lesbian as such. One or two lesbian relationships just when I was younger. I'm trying to think how to explain this now. Yeah, I was in with quite a bohemian crowd in Hume and Manchester. So obviously people could dress how they wanted and go home with who they wanted and whatever and all this. And that began to pall. And I thought this isn't really what I want when I was in my 30s. And funnily enough, when I was about 40-ish, this group called Press for Change evolved in Manchester, led by Professor Stephen Whittle, who was a transgender man and professor of law at MMU. You see how these things come round and round in circles, you know. And I thought, oh, I'll join them, make a few friends, I'll send them a few bob and support them. And when I was coming up to 50, I thought 50, that's like your golden year, your golden anniversary. I'm going to make some changes and see if I want to live nominally as male. So I went down the psychiatric route, was told that I was sane, which is good. And I lived nominally as a male for about 5 or 6 years, by which time I've met Chrissy via another series of coincidences, which was interesting. So the two of us were in a position of transitioning together really for some time. I used testosterone for a number of years. And I helped to form the first support group for transgender men and people born female who are considering transition in Manchester. And it went very, very well for quite a few years. We got lots of people interested in coming from all over the place because that support just had never been put in place. Some transitioned, some didn't. Some decided to be more or less like myself, which is kind of, you know, your own gender really. And I gradually, I mean, I'm trying to condense a decade here, but I gradually decided to let the testosterone taper off. And I just lived, I mean, a lot of identity is contingent upon what other people see, isn't it? So I just live as an eccentric older lady now with my partner, who everybody thinks is my son. Chrissy's 20 years younger than me, and because she works in DIY, she's often stomping around the flat with a shaved head and jeans and a t-shirt. So they either think she's my toy boy or my son, you see, or one of the builders. And we have a very good relationship. We're getting married.
Yay! Congratulations.
She is the father of two, well, I say two children, they're two teenagers now from way back in her life. We haven't seen them for quite a while, actually, due to the virus, again, like everything. But that's where I am now, really. So my voice is getting hoarse. That's where I am. Thank you. It's where I am at the moment. It's just me, I suppose, you know.
It's a fascinating, I find it a really fascinating story. And particularly, I was rereading the first email you sent me before we did this podcast.
Oh, right, yeah.
When you mentioned about how that quite a few people who seek spiritual enlightenment have gender identity issues or simply don't care much about social rules. And the basic fundamental teaching of Krishna consciousness, the first fundamental basic teaching is we are not the body. We're actually eternal spiritual beings. And actually, so theologically, that Krishna is God is kind of the second bit. So that's the fundamental thing that Srila Prabhupada and all the acharyas and spiritual teachers before him taught, is that we are not the body. we're eternal spiritual beings. And the reason kind of why we're, not why we're going wrong, but the reason why sometimes we don't feel like we fit in, or we don't feel like we are comfortable in the bodies that we're in, or the material world that we're in, is because we don't belong here. This actually isn't our home. So we're here temporarily. And one devotee once explained it to me that we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes. And don't you think that with the trans movements, if you like, that everybody's screaming and crying about now, it is part of a spiritual development? I mean, not necessarily people who are deeply transsexual and are very, very distressed and could only live by having certain operations and treatments and so on, but people like Eddie Izzard who say, I'll dress how I want to dress. These aren't women's clothes, they're my clothes. I worked and paid for them. And if you don't like it, I'm really not interested in you not liking it. I think there's a huge thing rolling up, and I think that's the upside of Kali Yuga, if you like, where things are getting broken down and pointed out and made obsolete, that there's this huge creativity coming out of it.
And also we, you know, you and I have existed forever. We're eternal spiritual beings. So not that we'll exist forward from here forever, but also previous, if that, I'm using kind of time to measure it now.
You can't use linear time to measure it though.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. I mean, we're kind of sometimes drawn into that to explain it to people in layman's terms, but you and I have had thousands of lifetimes before this. And there's a very good chance that in previous lifetimes I appeared as male and female and, you know, animal, plant. And what often can happen is experiences of previous lifetimes can come out, or come out, as I can't think of a different word to use, but can come out, emerge in the experiences and that we're having now. You know, I know one devotee who in this life, I hope she won't mind me saying, is biologically female, but in a previous lifetime was biologically male, and will often have memories, clear memories about that previous life as male. You know, so and there's a number of stories like that. One I won't say his name, but one Hare Krishna guru who's quite liberal on LGBT issues. He explained, so in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, what you think of at the time of death, you become. So the goal is, if we think of Krishna, we go to be with Krishna. So what you think of at the time of death, you become in the next life. So he was therefore saying theologically, let's say, for example, two men love each other. There's a possibility that in a previous life, they were also in a relationship. So when the wife, I'm using general terms here, when the wife died, she was thinking about her husband. So she comes back as a man because she was thinking of a man at the time of death.
That's very interesting, isn't it?
Now, I know some practitioners in the Hare Krishna tradition might not be comfortable with that analogy, but I quite like it. It really sums up really well LGBT issues. You know, I know one couple, I know a lot of couples, I know one couple that have had, I think they believe through past life, what's it called? Regression, that they've had at least 15, they were in together at least 15 lifetimes before.
Yeah, my mum and dad had an odd experience of that, actually. And you've just jogged a memory when they were very young, before we were married, when we were about 24, 25, something like that, seems younger. And they were walking out of one of the lovely Art Deco cinemas in Blackpool, which is sadly no longer there. And they were holding hands, and they turned to look at each other. And as they looked at each other, it wasn't the steps of the cinema, it was the steps in a Greek city by a temple. And they had long robes on, and my mum had a bracelet and things. And she said it was just for a fraction of a second. And my dad saw it too. And they said, "Oh, what was that?" They said, "Oh, we must have been together in ancient Greece or Rome or something." It was as if the architecture of the cinema lent itself to that stimulus of that deep memory, a cellular memory, if you like, although we have different cells from when we were born, don't we? But anyway, they knew that they knew each other. It was very odd. I knew that I knew Chrissy the first time I saw her. I saw a picture of her looking through the leaves of a plant, just being silly in a restaurant, somewhere like that. And I hadn't got any knowledge of who she was or what she was, what gender she was, how old she was, or anything. And I thought, that's my partner there. So I was in a happy position of finding my ideal partner when I was 53.
Wow.
Yeah, which is fine. I'm going to live till I'm very, very old in this life. I know I am.
That's good. I'd if I'm in good physical health, I'd like to live into my 90s if possible.
Oh yeah. Well, don't talk to me about good physical health. I mean, this is the thing I've had to learn this time around. I put myself through university after years working in Woolworths and betting shops and retail and whatever. Got a good degree, got a good job, and just collapsed in my 30s. No more job, no more salary.
Wow.
It was what had to be, unfortunately.
So you became ill in your 30s?
Yeah, about 35, something like that. Yeah. I just noticed one day that my muscles were really sore in my leg, and I went home and I lay down and I had this terrible pain, like somebody had got a lit cigarette and run it down my leg. And then the leg just went limp. And of course, I originally thought it was multiple sclerosis, but nobody could find anything. And the situation got worse and worse. And that was it. No more work for me. Although I did do quite a lot of teaching, just little bits here and there, an odd afternoon a week.
Yeah. You
study skills.
I kind of reminded myself of that when I reread the email you sent me some time ago about your background. You did a PGCE in adult education.
Yes.
So tell us about what that involved. What did you teach adults?
Well, I used to go and teach adults more or less anything that they wanted, really. I'd go and help out at colleges, usually adult literacy, where people needed assistance with understanding more about how to read and write efficiently, because perhaps they left school at 15. You could leave at 15 when you were my age, and they were embarrassed by it. And then other people who'd been working for a time but wanted to go to college and needed to learn the study skills, like using a library efficiently, the Dewey Decimal System, how to timetable your work, the difference between a seminar and a tutorial, all that kind of thing. And I've also worked with other disabled people, disabled students, note-taking for them because they can't move their arms or whatever. All that good stuff, really. Too many to mention, really.
It's good. Even though I find your story fascinating. You've done so many things in your life. It's got a kind of a colorful, eventful life, which I really like. I remember when I was about 17, 18, or maybe a bit younger, and I felt very depressed by the prospect of, or the reality of, you get an education, you get a job, and you work for 50 years, you pay your taxes, which is fine. I don't mind paying taxes. You work for 50 years, then you retire. And I just felt, well, life's got to be more colorful than that, more attractive. I want to do more things. I want to experience more things. And when you kind of sent me your resume, if you like, I was quite impressed by a lot of the stuff that you've done in your life.
Thank you. I'm sure you've done a lot more than me, but in different ways. I mean, I've never been out the country. Even at my age, I've not been well enough to go anywhere properly. But
wow. Well, there's still time. There's still time when the pandemic's over. You can travel. In terms of the Hare Krishna movement, this is just a personal view. I would love to see more people that are maybe transgender, that feel that they have a home in the Hare Krishna movement.
Yes, absolutely.
Feel welcome in the Hare Krishna movement. I know of one devotee, one Hare Krishna devotee. So she now identifies as female, was born male, has transitioned, and received initiation in the Hare Krishna movement. So she, initiation. So she was given her beads and was given a new name. And out of interest, I asked her, what did your guru think about you transitioning? And she said, oh, he didn't mention it at all. And I felt quite pleased by that, because it wasn't an issue.
Is this an older lady? Because there's somebody who is at least my age who's been in the Hare Krishna movement since the beginning of time.
Since the beginning of the Kali Yuga.
Yeah, it's a Diksha guru who names people. She's not a, yeah, she's the one that females are allowed to be now, but she's probably getting on for 70. And I know there is somebody for a fact, and I wouldn't give the name on principle, and I can't think of it right now anyway.
I mean, the broad the kind of LGBTQI community in the Hare Krishna movement certainly publicly is quite small, and therefore, unfortunately, the transgender community is even smaller. I mean, I know of now another devotee who I mentioned on the LGBT podcast a few months ago, who has transitioned from female to male, and is waiting for a new name from her guru. She's asked for, and she was initiated as a woman and was given a female sounding Hare Krishna name, and she's now waiting for her guru to give a new male sounding name.
He's now waiting.
I'm sorry. He's now waiting.
Yeah. Oh, right, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to contact me, you know, let them have my Facebook.
Yeah.
Details.
If anyone does want to get in touch with Felix, you can message this Facebook page, which this podcast is on, and then I can just put them over to you straight away, and they can chat for hours with you about lots of exciting issues. So I think, I mean, is there anything else you particularly want to cover?
Now then. I do have a question about Krishna, actually.
Yeah, go ahead. I will try and answer it. I'm not a theologian. I'm a neophyte, really.
Sounds very magical, doesn't it? Neophyte.
Yeah,
the golden
fairy.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about the body not being the self. Now, when Krishna appears as Sri Krishna and as, I can't think of the world now, the world. I'm sorry, this is the word. Because I'm tired. Yeah.
It's okay.
It is the manifestation in human form of Godhead. Now, he seems essentially male, but to be the manifestation of God, and you've got to reflect everybody, is he actually an androgynous figure, or does Radha incorporate that side of things, or what?
In the Hare Krishna tradition, the Vaishnava tradition, we generally don't use the word incarnation as Krishna. So incarnation, karni means flesh, so yeah. God in the flesh. So Christianity, incarnation, definitely one incarnation, Jesus Christ. We wouldn't use the term incarnation to refer to Krishna. We'd use the term instead, well, we refer to Krishna having a transcendental body. So Krishna appeared in his original form, his transcendental form, on planet Earth 5,000 years ago. So there's differences in terms of how we understand male and female, though, from a physical point of view and a spiritual point of view. We also recognize, as according to scripture and what the gurus have taught us, is that the Supreme Godhead is male and female. So Srimati Radharani is the feminine, or the female aspect of the divine. Now, there are, even in the Hare Krishna movement, different theological views about male and female spiritual issues. So often if you go to a Hare Krishna temple, there will be deities on the altar, and they'll have a name. So the man Bhaktivedanta manner, they're called Radha, Sri Radha Gokulananda. So Radha is the feminine aspect, and Gokulananda is the kind of Krishna male aspect. So generally, that gives us the theological understanding that we go through the feminine to get to the masculine. So we go for the woman first, if you like, or the feminine aspect of God. Now that is actually very similar to the Catholic tradition. And I had this kind of brainwave about 6 years ago. I was in the Republic of Ireland walking around a graveyard of all places. And I saw this, I was chanting Hare Krishna in the Catholic graveyard on my beads. I was camping. I've had interesting experiences. And I saw this gravestone, and my knowledge of Catholicism is very limited. And it said something like, "Hail Mary, Mother of God, petition us," or petition Jesus, or basically, it was basically saying to Mary, speak to Jesus on our behalf.
Yes, she can petition.
Jesus. So they were asking Mary to have a word with Jesus for us, to try and get us in his good books. And that's actually the same in Hare Krishna, Gaudiya Vaishnava theology.
Interesting.
We're asking the feminine, because we're told in the Srimad Bhagavatam, all the stories about Krishna, that Krishna is besotted by Radha. He loves Srimati Radharani, so beautiful. He's besotted with her. So if Radha asks him to do something, he'll do it because he's completely in love with her. So if we can please Radharani, the feminine aspect of the divine, then Krishna will be pleased. So that's certainly an approach to look at it. I think I've answered your question.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
And then the other thing to say, and this next thing is why I would say that actually the Hare Krishna movement is actually quite progressive, or it should be seen as progressive on issues of inclusion and sexuality and gender identity. So we recognize Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared 500 years ago. He was the originator of the Hare Krishna movement. He was the one that started the mass chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra in India. And we recognize him as an avatar of Krishna and Radha, not just Krishna.
So, yes. They're the golden person, aren't they?
Yeah. I'm trying to see if I've got a picture to hand, and I haven't. So Lord Chaitanya appeared 500 years ago. So some theologically would use the term incarnation. We don't use that, but he was a recent avatar. Avatar means one who descends from the spiritual world, comes down. There's a film called Avatar. I've never actually seen it, but there's a film, and in traditional Hinduism, there's the 10 principal avatars of Vishnu. So we recognize Chaitanya, even though he was biologically male, he was an avatar. I was going to say incarnation then. He was an avatar of the male and female aspects of the divine.
Right.
So scholars in the Hare Krishna movement would say, well, that's because he came to experience himself, whatever that means. He had
it's a complex idea.
Yeah,
I can see it. Yeah,
it's certainly there. And I mean, I know we're not talking about Christianity, but people will often talk about the church being the bride of Christ. And the church is the people, and there's Christ, and they're in a relationship, male and female aspects of spirituality. I mean, I'm not a Christian mystic by any means at all, but there's certain links there.
I've got a Baphomet t-shirt on, actually. I don't know if you're familiar with Baphomet at all. Stand up.
Reading is, I think it says reading is fun.
Reading is fun, and the Baphomet's there holding on to a book, and that's people say it's an ancient image. It was actually created by a Catholic priest, actually, Louis Constant.
I can't believe that.
His mystical name was I've just gone completely blank. I told you I'm not well today at all.
Don't worry.
His father, Louis Constant, he became known as Eliphas Levi. He took a mystical Hebrew name. And the Baphomet, a lot of people look at it and scream and run away because it's got horns and think it's the devil. But it's actually a picture of a manifestation of male and female all in one. It's a divine hermaphrodite figure. I've always been very interested in that. I find it a very moving image. So,
yeah.
Anything else you want to talk
No,
about?
I mean, in terms of kind of gender identity and spirituality in the Hare Krishna movement, people will have different views on, I often see organizations like ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. In one sense, is a kind of a microcosm of the bigger, wider world. So there's people in the movement that will be more conservative than others, people in the movement that will be much more liberal than others. Generally, and this is a generalization, I don't upset any listeners now, but generally Western converts to ISKCON are, I would say, are maybe a bit more liberal than those from an Indian background, because we've lived in Western culture, Western society, you know, and there's a good chance we'll have out gay friends, or might have a friend who's transitioned from one gender to the next, you know, and yeah, I mean, I've certainly always tried to position myself comfortably on the liberal wing of the Hare Krishna movement. You know, if we're not the body, why do we get so obsessed with bodies?
Yeah, so a psychologist I was seeing as part of my treatment was a bit flummoxed by this when I said, of course, we're not actually the body. And she said, oh, what do you mean? What do you mean? I said, oh, gosh, here we go. And yeah, 30 years of study in 10 minutes. And I said, well, you know, men and women are not that different. What I'm talking about is how I perceive myself and how I move in social space and so on and so on. I really wanted to chat about this. And she said, what do you mean not that different? And I said, well, fetuses start off as nominally female anyway. It's the default option, and then you get the action of the adrenal glands and whatever. And men still have nipples, although they're not usually that particularly useful. And we're not that different. And she was like, oh, I never really think about that. And I thought, well, you should, because if you're getting paid. You know? So it's funny though, if you say to people that we're essentially not, we're bodies, we're embodied, but we are not bodies. A lot of people really don't get it. And I've just been brought up, well, not brought up to think that, but I've come to that conclusion anyway, that, you know, it's temporary, it's changing all the time.
It's changing all the time.
I've changed it now, look.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
and you know, the Bhagavad Gita teaches us that you know, the physical death, the death of the body, is just another change. It's like we change our clothes from day to day or whatever, in terms of I wear a different jumper today or a different t-shirt. Well, when the body stops working, it's another change. Ourselves, our spiritual beings, experience another change.
We slough it off like a snake with your skin.
Yeah. Felix, it's been really good to chat to you today.
It's been great fun.
We've had a whistle-stop tour of different issues around spirituality, the esoteric, gender identity, transgender issues, which is fascinating. And I would love to see, you know, this is, I guess, a message from me to people in the transgender community, that please do consider exploring Krishna consciousness and looking at Krishna consciousness and reading about Krishna consciousness. Something that we haven't mentioned up to, Felix, is that you've come to Krishna consciousness kind of later on in life when you're reading different books, but it was your father that actually once said to you, remind us what your father said to you.
It was towards the end of his life, actually. Actually, no, he may have said it then as well. But I was saying something to him about death, as kids do, you know. And he said something like, oh, it's all in the Bhagavad Gita, you know. He had his own copy of it. And I think possibly he said that to make me go away and read it and leave him alone after work, instead of asking all these awkward questions, which I did incessantly, you know. And it's life, he said, it's all about it, it's all in the Bhagavad Gita. So I've come full circle, haven't I?
It's fascinating. Your father, who was involved with esoteric groups like the Theosophical Society, encouraged you to read the Bhagavad Gita, which which is fantastic. So thank you, Felix, for joining us this week on the 20th edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. And I'm hoping to come up to Old Trafford, Manchester area later this year, and hopefully we can meet up for real. Well, this is real now. This is a real experience we're having, but in you know, physically we can meet up. So thank you for tuning in. So what I'm going to do is I'll put a link to Galva above this broadcast, so people can again look up Galva, the Gay and Lesbian Vaishnava Association, and look at the fantastic work that they do. And if you are someone who would like to get in touch with Felix, do message this Facebook page, the Hare Krishna Project, and I will link you up via social media. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do like it and share the link with others. If you're watching this on Facebook, please do like it or love it or care for it. You can care for it now on Facebook.
Oh,
Yeah, it's kind of a hug. Someone's hugging. There's an emoji hugging a heart. So actually, all of them are positive except the angry one.
that's true. Yeah.
So it's like, love, and care for, I think, are the
Very
options.
nice.
So we want you to do one of those three things and put a lovely comment and do share it as well. Until next time, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.